welcome to the Connect to Engage video chats. This is the show that's all about communication and how critical it is across all industries and professions. I'm Jennifer Murphy, and joining me are my fantastic co-hosts, Adrienne Wallace and Sonia Sethi-Kohli, and we together are Connect to Engage. Our goal for each video chat is to bring thought-provoking conversations and expert perspectives all around communication. So for each sessions, we invite professionals from the same industry to give their stories and their experiences surrounding communication. What works, what doesn't work in order to accomplish tasks and make connections. Today, we are welcoming two professionals from the airline industry, and you will hear about their journeys in their profession. We'll talk in depth about effective communication and why it's essential for a prosperous and rewarding career. So I'd like to welcome Denise and Jan.
Hi.
Hi, guys. Hi. All right, I'm going to kick it off, and I'm going to pass the baton over to Sonia.
Thank you both for joining us and spending your time with us. We're excited about this conversation. Let's start things off. If you both, whoever wants to go first, could tell us a little bit about your position in the airline industry and how you got to where you are today. Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, I'll go first. I'll volunteer. So I am a captain for a major US airline. I've been with my current company for 21 years. Always wanted to fly as a kid, and so started taking lessons in college and working my way up through flight instructing, Grand Canyon tours, regional airlines, and now with a major airline. So in addition to my duties as flying as a line pilot, I am also a check pilot, which means I go back to our training center and I do simulator training and evaluations for our pilots. And when new pilots come on board, they have to fly with a check pilot initially for their first usually 25 hours after they've done all their ground and simulator training. And also when they upgrade to captain, they do that as well. So I kind of go back and forth between a regular line pilot and an instructor evaluator at the same time.
That's great.
Okay, my name is Denise Simmons, and I'm with a major airline for 34 years, flying for 32 years. I started at the company's headquarters in HR for flight attendant employment, was there for about 6 months, and my boss said to me, "You're a flight attendant." And I'm like, "Nope, I'm management." And he's like, "Nope, you're a flight attendant." He's like, "Come talk to me when you're ready." And so within a year after that, I went in and I said, "Okay, let's give it a try." And thank God for that man. He saw something in me that I didn't see. And I'm happily flying for the 32 years now. So domestic, international, based out of San Francisco.
That's great. It's interesting that, Jan, you still hold two different roles within your position within the airline, and Denise, you've seen different roles. So I'm sure that makes the experience even more enriched for both of you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And speaking of roles, we'll have Denise start off for this one. Can you tell us about the role of effective communication within your day-to-day role?
So, I was thinking about this earlier, and I mean, all we really do is communicate the whole day. It starts with when we meet outside of the plane, we introduce ourselves, what the expectations of the flight are. Then we usually see our pilots, we talk to them, they tell us what the flight should be like as far as weather and how time. Then we talk to the gate agents and they tell us what to expect as far as passengers, any special needs, what time they want to start boarding. So that's, I mean, from minute one, we start communicating, and then, we just deal with a plethora of different people on board. I was thinking about this, how everybody is on board, and sometimes we lose grasp. We just see you as a person in a seat, and you have to stop for a minute, especially after doing it for so long. It's a business meeting. It could be a wedding. They're going to their own wedding. I had a couple go into Croatia to get married. I've had people who are trying to get to their loved ones before their family member dies. And so that kind of communication for 200, 300 people, you're constantly catering it to each person as best as you can. And then, you know, there's the emergencies that may come up, medical emergencies that we have. So then we have to communicate with ourselves and the pilots, so the pilots know what's going on. Do we need to land early? Do we need to not land early? Is there a doctor on board? Then we have to give all that information. So the whole flight is really about safety, of course, is always the background and the most important thing, but realistically, we're communicating the entire flight with each other.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Well, I was going to say, as a passenger, you can see that. You can constantly see as a passenger the communication that goes on between the flight attendants, and passengers and the pilot. So it doesn't go unnoticed, Denise.
Oh, well, thank you. Doesn't always feel that way, but thank you.
And I was actually going to ask, I've never thought about it. Some flights obviously have more passengers than others, but is there a certain ratio, like per 100 passengers, you have 2 flight attendants, or do you
I
find
think it's
that
every 50 flight passengers, you get 1 flight attendant. And then it also is based, I believe, and the captain can probably talk more on that, is on how many doors also the plane they have to be covered for safety reasons. So it's passengers and doors.
Yeah. And I always think about, even just, you know, for myself and my family, it's only 3 of us, but getting on a plane and all of the needs that we have. So, you know, looking at you doing that, you know, 50 times within, you know, a short period of time, just catering your communication to each person or each individual is, you know, kudos. That is a huge task. I would like to hear from you, Jan, as far as you have several roles, but just thinking about from the captain's perspective, and what is the role of effective communication?
It's very important. I communicate with a number of people, most of which is my co-pilot, my first officer. There's always a captain and a first officer. And we communicate through a couple different ways. One is through briefings and one is through checklists. So before each task, before each flight, before each approach, we do a briefing to make sure we have a shared mental model so that we both know what to expect. And then checklists, we usually do a series of tasks and we read the checklist, read and respond. That's another way of communicating to make sure that we've done all the critical items on the checklist, and it's all safety driven. We also communicate with obviously air traffic control, and that poses some big challenges sometimes because most of the air traffic control communication between pilots and controllers is a 2-way radio, which has its limitations. There's you can only go so far. So as you fly across the country, you keep switching over to different controllers. And there could be 20 different airplanes on one frequency, and they're all trying. Sometimes you got 2-3 people trying to talk on the same time. We call it stepped on. You know, you were stepped on. Say it again. You were stepped on. And it happens frequently. And there's static, there's dialects, or there's accents with different carriers and different pilots. So that's a big deal. What we've started doing recently, the industry has gone more towards an electronic, basically like a text message that we get on one of our computers, that air traffic control can uplink a message like, go direct to this point, or descend to this altitude, or change to this frequency, and we can respond just through a text. And it makes things so much simpler because now I have a written response of everything. There's no disambiguity. Did I hear that frequency right? Did I hear that altitude correctly? We also obviously talk with our cabin crew. Briefing the flight attendants before each flight is a big important part of our day. Telling them what to expect, how long we expect the flight to be, any inclement weather that's forecast, turbulence, rain showers, whatnot, delays that we may expect if there's anything wrong, maybe the Wi-Fi is not working in the cabin. They would want to know that. We communicate with the company through mostly electronic messaging, and we communicate with the passenger as well. Sometimes we do a pre-flight briefing telling them what the weather and how long things are going to be. Sometimes we don't. Most people kind of know. We all have our cell phones, so everyone knows what the weather is, where they're going. So try not to be too verbose, and try to keep it clear and concise. So
there you go.
And I'm one of those passengers who loves to hear the captain's voice just because it puts me at ease. I'm like, okay, everything's gonna be all right. I've heard from the captain. Let's go.
And there are times when when if I do have something important, I'll say, "This is the captain," in my best captain voice, because it does make a difference.
You must train the pilots how to do that, right?
I have a great face for radio, so that's what I've been told. But we've had male flight attendants who have deep voices who sing sometimes on the PA, and I've had pastors come up to me and say, "Hey, you're a pretty good singer." Oh, that was not me. I'm not cracking jokes, and I am not singing. That you're not going to get that. No, that's not happening. That was all our cabin crew. You're welcome.
Yeah.
It's like that voice of strength and reassurance, because you do have a lot of people, and obviously Denise being on the front lines, dealing with, the nerves and the anxiety and all of those emotions that come with whatever they're flying to or from, but also the possible fear of just being on a plane.
Yeah,
absolutely. Sure.
Absolutely. I was going to add that I would think with today's technology that the clarity of the sound might be a little bit better. I really want that, right? Because sometimes the pilot says something and you just can't understand the channel is not crystal clear. And I don't know if you've experienced that as a passenger yourself, or Denise, if there's different, I don't know, planes that have better quality than others. I mean, is it just me? What's going on with that?
I think a lot of it is how, at least for us, it's some people have the softer voices. Some people have, my voice carries very well. But then I have flying partners who are much more soft-spoken or maybe not as comfortable. And I'm not sure what goes on up in the cockpit and what your systems are like. Yeah, but
it's not the greatest PA system for sure, and especially some of the older airplanes are not great. And then your technique, how you hold the microphone really close, or how you enunciate your words is definitely. And when we talk about like the radio communication, sometimes when we're doing like long range, like oceanic flights, we have what's called an HF radio, which is even where it's constant static. The quality is horrible, but it goes very, very long ranges. So I can be in Hawaii and talking to someone in San Francisco over the radio, but the quality of the transmission is very poor. So again, in that situation, we do most of our communicating electronically through a keypad. So that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, that's reassuring. I like that.
I was going to say that's scary, but reassuring if you have a backup plan.
We do. Good. Yes, there's always a backup plan. That's the whole thing in our business. There's always a backup plan.
Yes. All right. So I would like to hear story time. So tell us about a time when communication resulted in either a vital success or an epic fail at work. Jan, why don't you go ahead and launch into something?
You had mentioned the passenger medical issues. I've had my share of those, and those sometimes don't work better than others because our system is kind of wonky. The flight attendant puts on a headset and transmits through a radio to a doctor and somewhere else, but that can go either. It doesn't always work as smoothly as we'd like to. But I had a scenario just this past year, my first emergency I had ever declared, and it was on a flight over the ocean, and we had a problem with one of the engines, and our checklist directed it to shut one of our two engines down. And we continued on to our destination. So it was the communication between myself and my co-pilot was very critical. We have a checklist that we followed, and my rationale is as long as we do it the way the checklist says, we know we're doing it correctly, because the checklist was written by engineers and by the airplane manufacturer. But also our communication with our company, let them know what's going on. Air traffic control, let them know what's going on. And of course, the folks in back, they're going to hear, it's going to get a little quieter back there, and they're going to be curious. We should really say something. That's another situation where we would say, this is your captain. I have a very important announcement. And, I try not to, people say, oh, you guys lie about this and that. No, it's just, we may, I don't want to say, there's thunderstorms at your destination, but I may say there's rain showers at the destination, things like that. So we kind of make it a little softer. But in that particular scenario, obviously the outcome was successful. Everything worked, as advertised. But our communication was very important between the two pilots, ourselves and the cabin crew, ourselves and the passengers, ourselves in the company, ourselves in air traffic control, and ourselves in the airplanes around us. Because when we're flying those oceanic flights, we're all on a track, basically like a highway, And we have to be in communication with other airplanes that are near us, because
Right.
when we do something like that, shut an engine down, we're going to come down to a much lower altitude. We can't stay as high as we could have been. But again, we plan for that. We make sure we have enough fuel for all the worst case scenario. Over oceanic flights, there's more risks, so there's more resources that we have to have ahead of time to counteract the risk. So, and
I imagine in that scenario, when you did lose an engine, I mean, there's tone plays a role, right? You can't get on the you can't be talking to your co-pilot like, oh my god,
right. And that's
absolutely
what I was thinking, is just, I'm getting anxious and overwhelmed just hearing your story, Jan. And so to maintain that composure, I can only imagine takes so much when there's so much pressure and all those moving pieces going on at once.
Well, they train us very well for those sort of things, and we've all had experience. I mean, I've been at my current airline for 21 years, but I've been flying airplanes for over 30. So, and all of us bring something to the table. We all have our experience and our our situations that have happened to us in the past, and we all bring that to the table. And of course, for my particular airline, we're all trained to do it a specific way. You may have done it something different at your previous airline or in the military or whatever your call it our past lives. What'd you do in a past life? Oh, I flew for so-and-so, or I was in the Air Force. So our training center, though, does a very good job of dealing with, obviously we have a checklist for most scenarios. We can't imagine every possible scenario. So there may be times when you need to go off a couple different checklists, or use your experience is one of our resources. We talk about risk resource management. There's certain risks involved in flying, and what resources do we have? So it's like a balance. What do we have to counteract the risk? One of them is effective briefings and checklists, communication. Of course, there's technology, there's external references like my dispatcher, my air traffic controller, but my own personal experience and techniques is a resource as well that helps lower risk.
Absolutely. Well, thankfully you landed safely, and that was
yes, we did.
Good job. All right, Denise, what about you? Do you have a good story for us in regards to communication fail or success?
So the funny story is, I was in training and they tell you, okay, if something happens, don't react, just stay calm and look like you're in control, right? So I was on one of my observation flights that you do when you're on training. You go in and you help work a little bit and you observe. And all of a sudden you hear this loud boom and the plane shook. And we did everything we weren't supposed to do. Me and my flying partner immediately go, okay, that's the nonverbal you're not supposed to do. And the passengers were all up in first class. They're like, oh, what was that? And we're like, I'm sure the captain will come on in just a minute. But we run into the galley and we're like, oh my God, what was that? We were struck by lightning. We were fine. It was fine. But we had never experienced anything like that. And yet now I know to keep my face very calm and collected. That was that learning moment. As far as us, mostly it's the medical emergencies that we have. I had flying from San Fran to Chicago just recently. I had a lady start having seizures. She came back and she's like, I don't feel good. And the next, she goes, I need to sit down. Sat down, she started having seizures about every 15 minutes. I think she had about 7 or 8 of them. So then we each have, as Jan said, we each have our assignments when something like this happens. There's the communicator. That's the person who takes the information from me, because I was the first person with her. And I take the information from her. I pass it on to the communicator. The communicator then calls the captain, gives the details, the statistics, because then our captain will call the doctors. And the doctors will evaluate the risk. And do we continue? Do we have to land? We called for doctors on board. So then I had to, as she was having seizures, communicate what was happening with her. And between them, the doctor on the plane and doctors off the aircraft, they had decided we needed to land. And so we landed in Kansas City, I think. So then the paramedics come on. So now you have to tell them all the information. Plus, she had stopped for a little bit. So I was able to call her husband, which is so nice nowadays, with the cell phone. And I was able to communicate to him that, look, she's going to a hospital in Kansas City. I don't know where or when, but she'll get a hold of you as soon as she can. So that way he was able to know what was also going on. So it was like a whole group of just, plus you have to continue your service. You have to make sure that the passengers who are still on there are still getting the drinks that they're expecting, because the people in the front of the aircraft don't know what's going on in the back of the aircraft where this lady was, you know?
Right.
So you still have to smile, but now you're down 2 flight attendants maybe. So it's, you have to try and be really nice and explain that, you know, either the ones who know is going on, everything's okay, or you just have to keep everything going. So that's kind of where we're at. We just constantly have to keep feeding information to each other and to that one, the lady. She was fine, thank goodness.
That's nice. And how cool to find out that there is a role called the communicator. I love it. That is really, really cool. I love it.
Yeah, that's their job.
That's right.
So both of you have decades of experience.
Oh, well, okay, let's say that nicer. A lot.
As a compliment. As a compliment.
It's a huge compliment.
When you're this age, it's not a compliment.
No, we would learn and get your insight from your years of service.
Thank you. Yes.
There's better. Just in terms of what do you feel like is the biggest or a consistent mistake that you see oftentimes with regard to communication in your industry?
Jan?
I see it in, so when I'm switch roles and I'm become the instructor or evaluator, when I train pilots, we do briefings, and our briefings have to contain certain items, but some of our crew members tend to overbrief and include much more information than is required. And there's a shared understanding that in a situation, I trust my first officer to know to do their job, and my first officer trusts me to do my job. But I don't need to be so verbose. Again, we create that shared mental model, keep it concise, keep it fairly simple, include the required items. But if you start to talk a little too much, you can lose your audience. We have themes in our training every year, and when all our pilots go back to the training center, one of our themes this year is better briefings, and they show an example of a crew giving a briefing, and the captain is going over every particular item, and the first officer then and then pretty soon the first officer starts going you know, it's like, you know, you can lose it real quick. So keep it clear, keep it short, keep it simple, because, you know, let's move on. So that's probably one of the bigger things I see with communicating, being too verbose.
Yep. Excellent.
I think for us, it's about the just forgetting about how everybody has a different background. Sometimes we just lump everybody together, y'all getting on in San Francisco, but they may have come in from Sydney. You know, different words mean different things. Different thumbs up means one thing in one country and it's not good, and thumbs up in this country means it's okay, you know? So I think we kind of assume that everybody's speaks the same language, but really, although we're saying the same words, it doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. And how you say it is the hard thing too. Like, I might be a little snarky, but it may be taken as offensive or something, you know? So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I might say decades of experience as a compliment. 5 years of service.
I'm just getting a little sensitive about the age lately. Yeah.
No, that's excellent observation as far as recognizing that words and intent and communication is not the same across cultures, and you must see it all day long.
Yeah,
Denise.
No, it's very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
And I think
Imagine, especially, I'm sorry, being based in San Francisco, we get a lot of connecting traffic that's wherever you're going in the United States. You could be coming through San Francisco, Los Angeles, from Sydney, anywhere in Asia or any number of countries coming and then connecting, going somewhere else. So I'm sure you get quite a diverse cross section of cultures getting on your airplane on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I was just going to add that I think what both of you offered with that question was things that we see in society in general, right? People have less of an attention span because there's so much communication from all sorts of places.
Sure.
So Jan, it's interesting you mentioned, we have we're already on the same page. We have that model already. So let's get to what we really need to know. And then Denise, to your point, we are becoming more and more of a multicultural society, and especially in the airline industry, you have to take note of those nuances.
Yeah.
Sure. Very interesting. Yeah.
So
right.
I have, not that I didn't already have a great appreciation for people who work in the airline industry, but I need to know whatever flight you all are on, and that's where I'm flying next. Just having, the experience, and you obviously are experts within, your own roles, and just knowing that there are people there who have others' lives literally in their hands. So it's a, huge responsibility, but also it's something that we appreciate you for. So.
Well, I like to say, like when I had my incident, my emergency last year, people said I got people were complimenting, "Oh, you did a great job." It's like any one of our pilots would have done the same thing. We've all been trained the same way. We have the same set of procedures. It would have gone fine either way. And just like, we all come from the same training center. So anytime you get on a flight, the pilots and the flight attendants are going to be as well up to speed, we hope, as we are. Obviously we all have different work ethics and whatnot, but we're all trained the same way, and we all have the same basic skills and tools to do the job.
All right, so with that, we are going to end on a more lighthearted note. So for fun, we're going to ask, if you could have any superpower for a day, what would it be and how would you use it? Denise, do you want to start that for us?
I think time travel. I'm such a people person that I would like to go back and come forward and see how much some of the stuff, maybe the airline industry, I don't know. I'm just such a people person. I really like observing the differences and seeing the change over all the years. So that would be my thing.
It's interesting you say that because you do time travel, just on a smaller scale.
Smaller time.
I love it. All right, Jan, what about you?
Mine is real nerdy and you're going to laugh, but I would want to be able to fly. But I fly every day, but like Superman fly, because I can't fly an airplane around buildings and under a bridge. That's really frowned upon. But if I was doing it by myself, I think that would be really cool. So
that'd be very cool.
Yeah, the time travel thing would be cool, but I'd probably do like a Marty McFly thing, or I'd go get the sports almanac or the lotto numbers or something like that.
Smart.
Well, that just says that you love flying so much that you'd even do it outside of a plane.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this concludes the episode of our Connect to Engage video chat. We definitely hope you enjoyed this immersive exploration into the role of communication in the airline industry. Our journey through communication skills in different industries does not end here. Remember, you are an integral part of the series, and your feedback, questions, and suggestions fuel our motivation and shape the future of this video chat series. So please reach out to us through social media channel, our website at connecttoengage.com. We'd really love to hear from you. We want to express our deepest appreciation to our panelists, Jan and Denise. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy lives to share your communication experiences with us. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey and being part of our community. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode of our Connect to Engage video chat. Be sure to remember to share this series with others who are just as curious and passionate about communication as we are. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you.
Okay, that was super fun. I thought they were both so engaging and really, really fun to talk to. So we're going to talk about key takeaways when it comes to communication in the airline industry. And what did you guys think?
I thought it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed hearing their perspective, especially for being in the airline industry in different roles for such a long period of time.
Yeah, I already appreciated people in the industry so much, but I have never actually sat down and had an in-depth conversation about their day-to-day roles. So when Denise said we literally are communicating all day from the minute we start, we're just on. And that is, I know we know that communication is an integral part of all industries, but to hear that from someone who's actually doing it on a daily basis is pretty, that's a great insight.
And I think, you know, what Denise said when she said that, it really put it into perspective. Like you were saying, you know that they're doing a lot, but you don't, unless I hadn't heard Denise say it, I wouldn't have really thought about all the different roles that they have and all the different groups of people that they communicate with. Same with pilots as well.
Right.
It was interesting because she said, you know, here I'm talking to the people at the gate and the cabin crew and the pilots and the passengers as they're getting boarded. But then she's like, I need to step back sometimes and really connect with the passengers, right? Because they're all flying for a variety of reasons, some good, some not so good. And so that was interesting that, you know, there's that communication that needs to happen for process and for, you know, the plane to take off and land safely, but also just to connect with her customers, right? Her passengers.
Well, and Denise is much more the face of the business in front of the customers than Jan, who is behind closed doors for the most part. And he was, you know, he'd mentioned communicating with different air traffic controllers, which I thought was very interesting, how they transition across the country, and you have to kind of make sure that those communications are super clear. But it sounds like, and my takeaway was for his communication, it's very regimented. It's has to be very structured. It has to be very, you know, safety driven with all the different entities. And Denise's is much more, yes, you have safety first, of course, but then you also have to meet people where they are. Like you said, Sonia, like someone's going to a funeral is a very different interaction than someone going to a bachelorette party.
Right. Not only that, though, yes, I agree with you where, you know, the pilots or Jan's communication is going to be more regimented, but even Jan mentioned that when he was talking about the emergency he had, I mean, I can only imagine the amount of composure and calm that he would need to exhibit just to get through and land safely. But also the nuance that he said when he said, I might not tell them that there's thunderstorms, but I'll say there's rain showers, right? Because just a little nuance can change someone's image and mood and all of that. So I thought that was interesting as well.
Yeah, being able to hold your composure, that's something that Denise shared as well, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. Passengers hang on to everything. So if you look panicked, they're going to panic. So we don't talk that much about nonverbal communication, but absolutely in that context and obviously in other industries as well is extremely important.
And
something she had to,
you know, everyone's from different cultures, and so that nonverbal communication might mean something in one language or one culture and something completely different, or even the verbiage that we use on a regular basis. Just paying attention again to nuance and who you're connecting with and how you're doing that. Sorry,
one term. No, you're good. One term we didn't discuss, but that kind of popped into my brain as we were having the discussion is code switching. So I imagine that for both Jan and Denise, but for Jan as a pilot, you can be on this long flight and be kind of chatting it up with your co-pilot and you're saying, you know, your verbiage is more casual. And then what in our industry, in the communication industry, you do this code switching where, okay, now I'm going to get on the PA system and I'm going to be talking to the passengers. So my tone has to change. My vocabulary has to change. I have to be more, I have to put, you know, my captain's hat on and have a different tone and a different communication style. So I imagine that that's kind of happens for both, you know, both professions, but in the airline industry, but for most industries, right? We do that. We code switch our communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, that holds true in terms of where Denise was talking about being the communicator, or having, you know, whoever came and talked to her about whatever medical emergency was going on was the communicator. And so it went through the line, you know, to the doctor, to the medical staff, wherever. But then she was eventually communicating to that passenger's husband to let him know that everything was okay, or where she was going. And so that communication is very different too, just like you're saying, in terms of process and getting the emergency services that we need, and, you know, letting your loved one know that your loved one is okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was also very interesting, and we talked about this a little bit during the conversation, how Jan had mentioned that, you know, when we're doing briefings, we have to make it brief, is essentially what he was saying. We need to make it concise and clear, but short enough that you can keep everyone's attention, because you already have a lot of that information. So give me what's new, what's important. And I think that's pretty important across industries, right? But especially in their roles, when they're briefing amongst the pilots and you know, their partners, they need to be able to attend to what information that they're getting. So
yeah.
And I think we're also thinking about the different modes of communication as well. And that's something I think from the last video chat that was kind of brought to the forefront, not just verbal. And here we're talking about nonverbal, but also written communication being extremely important. So for the person who might not want to listen to the long verbose briefing, they have a checklist, right? They have a written briefing. And even for the flight attendants, having, you know, the list of the obviously the passengers who are on the planes, and having that visual demonstration, whether they do it live or a video of the safety procedures of the plane. Like, there are a lot of modes of communication that are being utilized too. And especially my favorite is that there's a backup for this communication system with air traffic control, so they can type and read the notes if they can't understand because the radio isn't working very clearly. So,
well, isn't that interesting that Jan brought that up, that this is a new mode of communication, is that text, which he's like, then there's no ambiguity, right? There's no confusion, there's no static. It's clear. And I'm like, how are we just now introducing? I'm grateful. Thank you, Airline Industry, for coming up. But modes of communication change over time, and we figure it out as human beings, like better ways to communicate with each other. So well done. I think this was a great group, professionals. I'm really glad that Denise and Jan agreed to talk to us, and such an important role that communication plays in their jobs. So thank you everybody for tuning in. And like I said before, if you have an industry that you think that we should definitely not miss, let us know. And until next time, we'll see you later.